On my wedding day, my bride, Sophia Hayes, watched with a smile as her maid of honor and bridesmaids tormented me, hiding the shoes, forcing me to drink vile concoctions, making me read an embarrassing loyalty pledge. They kept escalating their games. Sophia, get them under control, I said, my voice tight with anger. It's our wedding day. Don't be a buzzkill, she replied dismissively, even siding with them. Just one more shot. It'll show you're serious. I ripped the boutonniere from my lapel and turned to leave. The older relatives rushed to block my path. Ethan, calm down. Don't take it so seriously with the girls. I ignored them, spun around, and my fist connected squarely with the face of the ringleader, Chloe Morgan. Ethan, time to get your bride. The door doesn't open until we see some cash. The booming, cheerful voice of Leo Carter, the best man, nearly rattled the heavy front door, emblazoned with a giant, glittery "She Said Yes" banner, right off its hinges. From inside, an even louder explosion of girlish laughter and shrieks erupted. Dressed in a sharp, charcoal gray suit, the single red rose on Ethan Vance's lapel was a vibrant splash of color. He wore the tense, practiced smile of a groom, took a deep breath, and motioned for his groomsmen to start stuffing a thick wad of $20 bills through the mail slot. Another round of squeals and chattering followed from within. Not enough, not enough. Mr. CEO, you think you could get our precious Sophia for this? Where's the commitment? A high-pitched, mocking voice cut through the door. It was Sophia's maid of honor and #1 best friend, Chloe Morgan. Today, she was decked out in a flashy sequined bridesmaid dress, her makeup perfect, her eyes glinting with mischief. The door finally cracked open, revealing a wall of bridesmaids in shimmering dresses. Chloe stood at the front, wagging a finger tipped with a blood-red nail. "Wannin', you gotta get through us first. Round 1, find the shoes. You have 3 minutes, and if you can't find them..." She drew out the words, sharing a conspiratorial look with Vanessa Chun and Tina Lee beside her. "Well, let's just say you're in for a world of hurt." The living room instantly became a chaotic treasure hunt. The groomsmen scrambled like headless chickens, flipping over couch cushions, checking behind curtains, and even feeling inside the air conditioning vents. Ethan, his patience wearing thin, scanned the room. The vanity? No. The closet? No. Under the bed? Empty. The seconds ticked by, and his groomsmen were starting to sweat. "Ethan, man, they really hid these things," Leo said, wiping his forehead, a note of panic in his voice. Ethan's gaze finally settled on Sophia, who sat on the massive bed in her pristine white gown. She had a shy, happy smile on her face, but her eyes were shifty, refusing to meet his. Something clicked in his mind. He knelt, gently lifting the voluminous layers of her wedding dress, which cascaded across the entire bed. And there it was, a delicate, crystal-encrusted heel tucked away in the innermost layer of tulle. "Whoa, the groom's a genius," one of the bridesmaids exclaimed with theatrical surprise, but it was drowned out by the groans of a foiled plan. Ignoring the noise, Ethan knelt on one knee, picked up the shoe, and looked up at Sophia. Her cheeks flushed a deeper red as she smiled, pursing her lips and extending her foot. Ethan took her slender ankle in his hand and carefully slipped the shoe on. For that brief moment, looking at her lowered lashes, the irritation from the game subsided. As long as she was happy, what did a little hazing matter? "Okay, you passed round 1. Chloe clapped, but her smile was anything but conceding. It was sharper, more malicious. "Round 2. Prove your devotion. Ladies, bring out the special reserve." Vanessa immediately pushed forward with a tray. On it sat 3 large glass tumblers, each emblazoned with a cheesy Mr. and Mrs. sticker. The glasses were filled with a murky, foul-smelling liquid. Floating on top were suspicious-looking slices of jalapeno and lemon. "Here you go, Ethan," Chloe announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. "A custom blend from the bridesmaids. We call it the husband's humility. It's got all the flavors of life, sour, spicy, bitter, and sweet. If you want to marry our girl, you've got to be ready for anything. Down these 3, and you'll prove your love for Sophia is deeper than the ocean." The acrid stench of pickle juice mixed with hot sauce and cheap tequila hit Ethan's nose, and his stomach clenched. He frowned slightly, looking to Sophia for support, for her to say something. But she just covered her mouth, giggling, her eyes sparkling as she stared at the disgusting concoctions as if it were the most amusing show on earth. "Chloe, isn't this a bit much?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice level. "A bit much. Tina likaimed inshurili. We're just getting started. Sophia is our princess. You think you could just waltz in here and take her? No way. Drink up. If you don't, it means you don't really love her." "Yeah, drink, drink, drink," the other bridesmaids chanted, the room filling with a wave of coercive energy. Ethan's face darkened. He looked at Sophia again, his eyes pleading. She finally spoke, her voice soft, but her words landed like a hammer blow. "Oh, Ethan, they're just having fun. It's for the party atmosphere. Just play along a little. Don't be a buzzkill." She even gave his arm a little push, a coquettish gesture. An icy rage shot up from the soles of his feet. For the party atmosphere? A buzzkill? He looked at her innocent, smiling face, and, for the first time, felt like he was looking at a complete stranger. He swallowed the anger churning inside him, knowing that losing his temper now would only make things worse. Clenching his jaw, he reached for the first glass. The noxious fumes burned his nostrils. He held his breath and tipped his head back, forcing it down. The cold, corrosive liquid scraped his throat like a razor blade, choking him, making his eyes water. His stomach heaved. He fought back the urge to vomit and slammed the empty glass back on the tray with a loud clank. "That's a man." Chloe cheered, her smile dripping with smug satisfaction. "Two more to go." Ethan didn't speak. His eyes were as cold as ice. He picked up the second glass and downed it in one go. This time, the spicy, sour assault, combined with the churning nausea, made a vein throb in his temple. He set the second glass down, his knuckles white from his grip. "Last one. Finish this, and the bride is all yours." Vanessa chirped, pushing the tray closer. Ethan stared at the third glass, then at Chloe's gloating face. Finally, his gaze locked onto Sophia. She seemed uncomfortable under his frigid stare and looked away, murmuring, "Just drink it. Everyone's waiting." That sentence snapped the last thread of his control. He raised his hand, not for the glass, but to point a finger directly at Chloe, his voice low but carrying a seismic pressure that cut through the noise. "Sophia, get them under control." The laughter and chanting stopped as if a switch had been flipped. The room fell into a dead, shocked silence, punctuated only by the soft whir of the videographer's camera. Everyone stared, first at Ethan, then at Sophia. Sophia was clearly blindsided. A flash of panic crossed her face, quickly replaced by a look of offended indignation. Her brow furrowed. "Ethan, what is wrong with you? It's our wedding day. Can you stop being so serious? We're all just trying to have a good time." She even leaned forward, gesturing toward the glass with a tone that was meant to be placating but was, in fact, gasoline on a fire. "Look, it's the last one. Just one more shot. It'll show you're serious. Drink it, and we can go okay." "Serious?" Ethan repeated the word, his voice dangerously low, a cold, sharp smirk twisting his lips. He stared at Sophia, the last shred of warmth in his eyes vanishing, replaced by the desolate fury of betrayal and humiliation. The wedding he had meticulously planned, the bride he had cherished. In his eyes, they were now no different from this mob of grinning harpies who were gleefully stripping him of his dignity. "Fine, you want to see how serious I can be?" Ethan nodded, his movements slow, almost surreal. In front of everyone, he raised his hand, not to the drink, but to the vibrant red rose on his lapel. He ripped it off, the pin tearing the fine fabric with a faint, sickening sound. Without a second glance, he balled it up and threw the mangled flower onto the bed. The splash of crimson on the white dress was a jarring, ugly stain. "The wedding," Ethan's voice was quiet but landed like a grenade, "is off." He didn't look at Sophia, whose face had gone deathly pale, or at the stunned, frozen bridesmaids. He turned on his heel, pushed past a shell-shocked Leo, and strode toward the door. "Ethan, Sophia's parents and a few of Ethan's relatives, who had been waiting in the hall, snapped out of their stupor and rushed to stop him. Sophia's mother, on the verge of tears, grabbed his arm. "Ethan, what are you doing? Stop this nonsense. It's your wedding day. Let's just talk this out." Ethan's father, a stern man who usually commanded respect, blocked his path, his face grim. "Ethan, stop right there. What is this childish behavior? Over a little joke? Get back in there. Don't make a scene. A little joke." Ethan violently shook off Sophia's mother, making her stumble. He stopped, turned, and his bloodshot eyes swept over the anxious, disapproving faces, finally landing on Sophia, who had followed him to the doorway, pale and trembling. He pointed back into the room, his voice shaking with pure rage, every word a shard of ice. "You call that a joke? That was a calculated humiliation. They wanted me on my knees. And you call that a little thing?" His hawk-like gaze shot past her and locked onto Chloe, who was hiding behind Sophia, a flicker of shock and sick satisfaction still on her face. Her, the ringleader. And you. Ethan's fury found its target. Like a cornered lion, he lunged back into the room before anyone could react. The smirk vanished from Chloe's face, replaced by sheer terror. She screamed and tried to scramble back, but it was too late. Ethan's fist, powered by every ounce of humiliation, rage, and despair he had endured, whistled through the air and smashed directly into Chloe's perfectly made-up face. Crack! A sickening thud of fist meeting bone, the faint pop of cartilage, and a ghastly, high-pitched shriek tore through the silent apartment. Chloe's body flew backward, crashing into the vanity table, sending a cascade of expensive perfumes and makeup clattering to the floor. Time seemed to freeze for a second. Chloe slid to the floor in a heap, blood gushing from her nose, staining her sequin dress and the plush white carpet. She clutched her face, letting out an inhuman howl. The other bridesmaids screamed and scattered like pigeons. Sophia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and terror. The shouting of the older relatives erupted again, louder and more frantic than before. Ethan shook his stinging knuckles, now smeared with a dot of crimson. He didn't spare a glance for the wailing Chloe on the floor, completely ignoring the chaos exploding around him. His cold eyes swept over Sophia's horrified, accusing face, and a cruel, final smirk touched his lips. Then he turned again, shoved past the stunned videographer, and stormed out of the apartment that reeked of celebration. Behind him, a symphony of destruction played out. Sophia's broken sobs of "Ethan, you bastard!" Chloe's piercing screams, the furious yelling of relatives, and the sound of things breaking. In the hallway, he kicked open the fire escape door, and the cold air hit him like a slap. He ripped off the tie that was choking him, threw it on the ground, and took the stairs down, two at a time, away from the wreckage, never looking back. The morning sun slanted through the stairwell window, casting a long, solitary shadow behind him. The wedding was over. For Ethan Vance, the war had just begun. Ethan didn't go home. The thought of their newly decorated condo, filled with flowers and happily ever after touches, made his stomach churn. Instead, he drove to his rarely used penthouse in River North, a sleek, minimalist space with a sweeping view of the Chicago River. The fingerprint scanner beeped, the heavy door swung open, and he stepped into the cold, sterile silence. The city lights glittered on the far bank, but none of their warmth reached him. He kicked off his pinching dress shoes, the cold marble floor a shock to his system. He walked to the wet bar and poured a heavy glass of whiskey. The amber liquid swirled, reflecting his clenched jaw and the fury still burning in his eyes. He didn't turn on the lights, letting the city's glow paint his solitary figure in shades of gray. In his pocket, his phone vibrated violently, the screen lighting up the darkness like a dying firefly. Sophia, his parents, her parents. A few clueless friends tried to play mediator. Their names flashed one after another. He ignored them all, held down the power button, and silenced the world. The only sounds left were his own ragged breathing and the heavy, rhythmic drumming of his heart. He threw his head back, and the whiskey burned a trail down his throat to his stomach, the fire miraculously quelling the nausea and rage. He needed to be calm, absolutely calm. Anger was a wild animal that devoured reason, and for what came next, he needed a mind as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the river of headlights below. The ice in his glass clinked softly, Chloe's face twisted in pain and shock. Sophia's look of whiny betrayal. The elder's pleas to not take it so seriously. The scenes replayed in his mind, each one a poisoned needle plunging deeper into his soul. Don't be a buzzkill. Just one more shot. It'll show you're serious. Don't take it so seriously with the girls. The words swirled, amplified, and finally merged into a glacial tide that washed away his last shred of hesitation. Ethan Vance was no one's doormat. If they dared to drag him through the mud on the most important day of his life, they had better be prepared to pay the price 100 times over. All within the bounds of the law, of course. He was curious to see just how many ways he could use the cold, hard rules of the system to make them suffer. He pulled out a new, barely used burner phone, powered it on, and dialed a number. It was answered after 2 rings. Ethan. The voice on the other end was calm and efficient, with a hint of surprise. It was David Chun, his personal assistant and most trusted confidant. He'd clearly heard about the disaster at the wedding. David. Ethan's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, hard as steel. 2 things. First, get Mr. Adler from Sterling and Rowe on the line. Tell him to clear his schedule and be at my River North condo tomorrow morning with his best people in marital asset litigation and forensic accounting. Second, use every resource we have. I want you to dig up everything on a few people. I want all their dirty laundry, especially the stuff they think is buried deep. He recited the names, each one a nail in a coffin. Chloe Morgan, Vanessa Chun, and Tina Lee. And David, give me the original and all copies of the prenuptial agreement Sophia had me sign. I want on my desk by sunrise. There was a 2-second pause as David processed the heavy, targeted instructions. Understood, Ethan. I'm on it. You want background on all of them, including Sophia? David confirmed cautiously. Everything, Ethan said, his voice iron, his eyes darker than the night outside. And pay special attention to Chloe's fiancé, Mark Sterling. He runs a construction supply business. I want to know about every questionable transaction on his books, every special relationship he has. The more detailed, the better. Yes, sir, David replied, his tone all business. He knew Ethan had been pushed past his limit and was now in scorched earth mode. After hanging up, Ethan finished the rest of his whiskey. The cold liquid ignited a hotter fire in his chest. He moved to the massive oak desk in his study and opened his laptop. The screen's cold light illuminated his blank expression. He created a new folder and named it Reckoning. His fingers began to move across the keyboard, the crisp, rhythmic clicks sounding like the opening notes of a ruthless symphony. Outside, the city hummed on, oblivious. No one knew that in the shadows of its glittering skyline, a meticulously crafted web of vengeance was just beginning to be spun. A cold, cruel smile finally touched Ethan's lips. The game was on. Chapter 3. 3 days later, the study in the River North condo looked like a war room. A massive whiteboard was covered with photos and printed documents. A complex web of relationships mapped out with colored magnets and lines. The faces of Chloe, Vanessa, Tina, and Sophia were pinned in the center, surrounded by details of their family backgrounds, jobs, social circles, and even their secret spending habits. Mr. Adler, a man in his late 40s with impeccably styled hair and eyes like a hawk, pointed to the photo of Chloe's fiancé, Mark Sterling. Mr. Vance, he reported, his voice steady. Sterling Materials is a house of cards. A preliminary review of his last 3 years of tax filings against his actual bank flows shows massive discrepancies. We've identified at least 5 project payments, each over $1 million, that were contracted to Company A but funneled through a shell corporation registered to his brother-in-law, before ultimately landing in Sterling's personal accounts and funding a boutique his mistress owns. It's a classic scheme, but he was sloppy. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, his fingertips drumming a silent, steady rhythm on the polished desk. His face was unreadable as he listened. The evidence? We're finalizing the chain, Adler said, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. We've already spoken to the owners of 2 of the Company A's. One is furious with Sterling over unpaid invoices and has original contracts and private recordings of Sterling instructing him on how to route the payments. Our people are approaching the other. The bank records and corporate filings are concrete. When the time is right, one anonymous, detailed tip to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division will be more than enough to bury him. The amount is substantial enough for felony charges. Good, Ethan said softly, his eyes moving to Vanessa Chen's photo. What about her? The nurse manager at the med spa. Vanessa Chen is even easier, Adler said with a cold, professional smile. The Aura Aesthetics Clinic where she works is legitimate. But Ms. Chen has a side hustle. She's been using her position to privately sell clients unapproved gray market injectables, mostly black market Botox and fillers, a huge markup. She's bold. She has her own little stockpile and runs the business through an encrypted messaging group. Our investigator is already in the group and has screenshots of her transactions and chats. And for the finishing touch, Adler paused. A few days ago, she gave a regular client a dose of an imported fat-dissolving agent. The client is now suffering a severe allergic reaction with localized skin necrosis and is demanding compensation privately. If we were to discreetly offer this client some pro bono legal counsel, encourage her to file an official complaint, and then accidentally leak the evidence of Ms. Chen's side business to her boss and the state health department, the outcome was obvious. A revoked nursing license, a ruinous lawsuit, and potential criminal charges for selling counterfeit medical products. The glamorous life Vanessa had built on her illicit income would crumble to dust overnight. Ethan's drumming fingers stopped. He gave a slight nod of approval. His gaze finally landed on the studious-looking photo of Tina Lee. And the scholar, Tina Lee, the candidate in sociology at Northwood University. Adler's tone was laced with contempt. Her dissertation, the cornerstone of her academic career, Identity Formation in Urban Youth Subcultures, a study of the cosplay community, the one that got published in the American Journal of Sociology. It's a complete fraud. He handed a thick file to Ethan. We hired a team of academic integrity specialists. Her paper's core thesis, its data models, and entire paragraphs of analysis were lifted almost verbatim from an unpublished conference paper presented 5 years ago at a niche European symposium by a German academic. The plagiarism rate exceeds 70%. We've contacted the German professor. He is, to put it mildly, appalled and is willing to provide all the original documentation needed. Furthermore, Adler added, her 2 other major publications have serious issues with patch writing and self-plagiarism. The evidence is irrefutable. Once we package this and submit it anonymously to NWU's Office of Academic Integrity and the Department of Education, her doctorate, her academic future, it would vanish in an instant. For someone like Tina, who valued her intellectual reputation above all else, this was a fate worse than death. Ethan flipped through the detailed evidence. It was all there in black and white, airtight and damning. He closed the file, leaned back, and shut his eyes. The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. After a long moment, he opened them. His eyes were cold and clear. He picked up another document from his desk, the prenuptial agreement Sophia had insisted they sign. Ethan, I'm not with you for your money, she had said, full of righteous pride. Signing this proves our love is pure. At the time, he had admired her independence. Now, every clause read like a cruel joke, a cage she had built for herself. Mr. Adler, Ethan's voice was as calm as if discussing the weather. This prenup, combined with the realities of our marital finances and state law. How much room do we have to maneuver? Adler understood immediately, a glint in his eye. Mr. Vance, the agreement itself is valid regarding premarital assets. The key, however, is that you and Ms. Hayes did not strictly adhere to the financial independence clause. The postmarital income from your corporate dividends and rental properties, and more importantly, the massive appreciation of assets from investments you made during the marriage using your separate premarital funds can, under established legal precedent, be argued to be marital property. This agreement fails to explicitly address the division of such commingled or appreciated assets. That is our opening. He pointed to a few clauses. We will argue that Ms. Hayes benefited from the lifestyle your wealth provided, effectively nullifying the independence clause in practice. Furthermore, our records show she made numerous large-scale purchases and investments using funds from your personal accounts, further blurring the lines. If we play this right in the divorce proceedings, we have an excellent chance of ensuring she walks away with absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, Ethan repeated softly, his finger tracing Sophia's elegant signature on the document. An image of her on their wedding day, telling him not to be a buzzkill, flashed in his mind. A cold, almost vicious smile slowly spread across his face. Excellent, he said, setting the prenup down. His gaze swept across the whiteboard, lingering on each of the women's faces before finally settling on Sophia's. His eyes were as sharp as a razor. Then we proceed as planned. Start with Chloe Morgan. I want to watch them fall. One by one. Chapter 4. The conference room at Sterling Materials was thick with a suffocating tension. Mark Sterling, usually a confident, backslapping figure in the local business community, was slumped in his chair, his face a ghastly gray, his forehead slick with cold sweat. Spread before him were official documents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, a notice of audit and a summons for all financial records. The stark black text, an official letterhead, felt like a death sentence. Mark, what is this? The company's CFO stammered. How did they suddenly? And they're specifically asking about the Apex and Northbridge project funds? Those books. They won't survive a deep dive. Shut up. Mark slammed his hand on the table, rattling the coffee mugs. His eyes were bloodshot, his chest heaving. Let them look. We've done nothing wrong. Even to his own ears, the bravado sounded hollow and pathetic. Just then, his phone began vibrating frantically. It was Chloe. Mark shot at an irritated glance and declined the call. But it rang again, persistent. He was about to turn it off when a text message popped up, a voice-to-text filled with frantic sobs. Mark, where are you? Something terrible happened. That psycho Ethan Vance attacked me. He went crazy at the wedding and punched me. I think my nose is broken. It hurts so much. Please come to the hospital. Sobbing. A surge of rage shot through Mark. Ethan Vance? The groom from that train wreck of a wedding? He hit Chloe? What the hell was going on? He was already drowning in this IRS nightmare, and now his fiancée was in hospital. It was a perfect storm of disaster. He snatched up the phone and called her back, forgetting the CFO was even in the room. What the hell did you do to him? He yelled in the phone. Why would he hit you? Where are you? How bad is it? His voice was a raw mix of anger and a dawning, terrible fear. He knew Chloe's personality, spoiled, entitled, and prone to taking things too far, but for Ethan to get physical was insane. Chloe's hysterical wailing came through the speaker. I didn't do anything. We were just hazing the groom. It's what you're supposed to do. I didn't know he was such a psycho. He was like a rabid dog. I'm at the ER at City General. They're taking me for x-rays. Mark, I'm so scared. You have to come. And we have to sue him. I want him in jail. I want him to pay until he's bankrupt. Sue him? Jail. Mark felt like he was going to crush his phone. Just worry about yourself. I'm in the middle of. He glanced at the damning IRS letter on his desk and choked back the rest of his sentence. He was fighting for his own survival. He didn't have the energy for Chloe's drama. And for some reason, the name Ethan Vance now cast a long, ominous shadow in his mind. The wedding disaster, now an IRS audit. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. I have an emergency here. You handle it. See a doctor. We'll talk about the money later. Mark barked, hanging up before Chloe could reply. He sank back in his chair, rubbing his face with both hands. The audit was a guillotine hanging over his head, and Chloe's hysterics were just fanning the flames. For the first time, he saw his beautiful, pampered fiancée as a potential liability. A huge one. The days that followed were a living nightmare for both Mark and Chloe. IRS agents descended on Sterling Materials, seizing accounting records and computer hard drives. Mark was repeatedly called in for interviews, and each time he returned, he looked more broken than the last. Rumors spread like wildfire through their social circle. Sterling Materials was cooked, massive tax fraud. Mark was facing prison time. The business ground to a halt. Partners backed out of deals, creditors started calling in their debts, and the bank froze their line of credit. The company Mark had spent years building was imploding in real time. Chloe wasn't faring any better. Her nose had a hairline fracture. It didn't require surgery, but the pain and the hideous, blotchy bruising made her a recluse. What was worse was Mark's attitude. When she called him, crying about her pain, he either ignored her or snapped, Sue, Sue, Sue. That's all you can think about? I'm fighting for my life here. The company is gone. Can you just be quiet for once? She tried calling Sophia for sympathy, but Sophia's phone was either off or she'd answer in a hoarse, exhausted voice and quickly hang up. She reached out to Vanessa and Tina, only to find they were wrapped up in their own crises. Vanessa was dealing with a nightmare client lawsuit, and Tina was hiding in the university library, claiming to be swamped with work, but her eyes were wild with anxiety. Chloe finally panicked. Her fiancé, the source of her lavish lifestyle, was about to go bankrupt or to jail. Her posse of best friends had vanished. The bruises on her face were a constant, throbbing reminder of her humiliation. A cold, isolating fear began to consume her. She was starting to realize, far too late, that the joke at the wedding had come with a price tag she couldn't possibly imagine. One afternoon, hiding behind oversized sunglasses and a face mask, she went to the Sterling Materials office building, hoping to catch Mark. From across the street, she saw him being escorted out of the building by two men in suits and into an unmarked government sedan. A few reporters were snapping pictures. "Mark!" Chloe screamed, trying to run toward him, but a security guard grabbed her arm. Mark heard her. He turned and looked at her for a split second. The look in his eyes wasn't love or concern. It was annoyance, exhaustion, and a flash of pure hatred. That one look struck Chloe like a bolt of lightning, freezing her to the spot. The car sped away. Chloe collapsed onto the cold sidewalk, her sunglasses clattering onto the pavement. Onlookers started to stare and whisper. Finally, right there on the steps of the building that had once been the symbol of her success, Chloe Morgan began to howl like a wounded animal, her cries echoing in the busy downtown street. It was over. Everything was over. She didn't know how, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the source of her ruin was the man who had walked out of that wedding, Ethan Vance. His name was now the monster in her darkest nightmares. Chapter 5, the VIP consultation room at Aura Aesthetics was thick with tension. The usual scent of antiseptic and expensive essential oils couldn't mask the acrid smell of impending disaster. Vanessa Chun, immaculate in her nurse manager's uniform, struggled to maintain a professional calm, but the slight tremor in her hands and the sheen of sweat on her forehead betrayed her rising panic. Across from her sat three people. Mrs. Davenport, her face a mask of fury, a patch of angry, inflamed skin visible on her jawline. A stone-faced female lawyer in a power suit, and the owner of Aura Aesthetics, Mr. Liu, whose expression was thunderous. "Mr. Liu, look at this. Look at my wife's face." Mr. Davenport's voice trembled with rage. "We've spent a fortune here over the years because we trusted you. And what happens? Your nurse Chun here swears to my wife she has a special hookup for an imported fat-dissolving agent, better and cheaper than what you offer. My wife believed her, paid her cash, and let her inject it. And now look, her face is ruined. The dermatologist said it's a chemical burn and infection, and it might leave a permanent scar. What are you going to do about it?" Mrs. Davenport, clutching her cheek, choked back a sob. "Vanessa, that's not what you said. You promised it was completely safe, just like the official stuff. Now that there's a problem, you're just going to deny it? Not a chance." Vanessa's face was ashen. "Mrs. Davenport, you can't say that," she stammered. "When did I ever sell you anything privately? Do you have any proof? Your reaction could be from anything, an allergy, poor aftercare." "Proof?" The lawyer gave a humorless laugh and slapped a stack of papers onto the glass coffee table. "Miss Chun, perhaps you'll recognize these. They're printouts of your encrypted text messages with my client. Here you are promoting the product, guaranteeing the results, and arranging payment. Here is the Venmo transfer to your personal account." And the lawyer produced a small, unlabeled vial in a sealed evidence bag. "This is the leftover vial from the injection, with no FDA approval number or English language labeling. We've already sent it for preliminary testing. The lab report indicates the contents are of unknown origin and composition and pose a significant health risk." The evidence was damning. Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. She swayed on her feet, grabbing the edge of the chair for support. She looked desperately at her boss. Mr. Liu's face had gone from angry to apoplectic. He snatched the papers and scanned them, his hands shaking with rage. Vanessa. Chun. He spat her name out, his voice low and venomous. You had the audacity to run a black market pharmacy out of my clinic? Selling this counterfeit poison? Do you have any idea the damage you could have caused? You could have killed someone. You could have destroyed the reputation of Aura Aesthetics. He flung the papers at her face. The edges of the paper stung her cheeks. Mr. Liu, I can explain. She whimpered, but the words wouldn't come. A tidal wave of fear crashed over her. She was fired, that was certain, but that wasn't the worst of it. Mr. Liu, the lawyer interjected, her tone icy and precise. On behalf of my client, due to the gross negligence and illegal actions of your employee, which have resulted in significant physical and emotional damages, we are formally seeking compensation. We are demanding $8 million to cover medical bills, future reconstructive surgery, lost wages, and pain and suffering. If we cannot reach a settlement, we will immediately file a report with the state health department and proceed with a lawsuit. Furthermore, her sharp gaze turned to the bloodless Vanessa. We reserve the right to press criminal charges against Ms. Chun personally for practicing medicine without a license and distributing counterfeit drugs. $1.8 million. Vanessa shrieked, the room spinning around her. She had made good money from her side business, but she had spent most of it on designer bags and lavish vacations. She didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. Vanessa, you made this mess, you clean it up. Mr. Liu immediately distanced himself, turning to the Davenports with a placating smile. Please, rest assured, Aura Aesthetics will handle this with the utmost seriousness. Her actions were her own and have nothing to do with the clinic. She is terminated, effective immediately. We will cooperate fully with any investigation. She is personally responsible for all damages. He turned back to Vanessa, his eyes merciless. You're fired. Get your things and get out. And you better pray Mrs. Davenport's face heals, or you'll be dealing with this in a courtroom. No, Mr. Liu, you can't. I've been a loyal employee. Vanessa lunged forward to grab his arm, but he shoved her away in disgust. Get out, he roared, pointing at the door. Vanessa was escorted out by security, clutching a cardboard box with her personal effects. She stood on the bustling sidewalk, the sun bright in her eyes, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from angry clients and collection agencies. Her job was gone. A mountain of debt loomed over her, and the threat of criminal charges. If the Davenports pressed charges, she could go to jail. Everything she had worked for, the sophisticated life she was so proud of, had been shattered in a matter of days. A terrifying thought began to form in her mind. The invisible hand that had just pushed her off this cliff felt chillingly familiar, like the shadow of Ethan Vance. The small conference room of the Northwood University Office of Academic Integrity felt airless, the silence as heavy as lead. At one end of the long table sat a panel of grim-faced, gray-haired professors. At the other, Tina Lee sat alone, her face the color of chalk. Her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white, and a slight, uncontrollable tremor ran through her body. On the table before her lay several thick files, each one a nail in her academic coffin. The man at the head of the table, the esteemed dean of sociology and chair of the ethics committee, Dr. Peterson, adjusted his glasses. He looked at Tina, his expression a mixture of profound disappointment and stern duty. Ms. Lee, his voice was low and somber, breaking the silence. We are here today to discuss a formal complaint of academic misconduct regarding your doctoral dissertation, Identity Formation in Urban Youth Subcultures, as well as 2 other journal articles submitted as part of your Ph.D. candidacy. The committee has received a detailed, anonymous, and heavily substantiated report. Dr. Peterson continued, picking up a file. After a thorough review by an independent panel of experts, the conclusion is, he paused, each word landing like a hammer blow, that your dissertation's core argument, research framework, data models, and over 70% of its textual content are nearly identical to an unpublished conference paper presented 5 years ago by Dr. Karl-Heinz Müller of Germany. In many places, it is a direct translation. This constitutes a severe and systematic act of plagiarism. As for your other two articles, he picked up the remaining files. One shows extensive evidence of patch writing, mosaic plagiarism, from 3 separate English-language sources without proper attribution. The other was found to have been submitted and published in 2 different peer-reviewed journals simultaneously, a serious breach of academic ethics. Dr. Peterson set the files down and looked at Tina, his gaze unwavering. The report included Dr. Muller's original paper, a line-by-line comparison, and a full plagiarism analysis. The evidence is conclusive and irrefutable. Ms. Lee, do you have any explanation? Explanation? Tina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her throat felt like it was stuffed with wet cotton. Her mind was a screaming void of pure terror. The brilliant persona she had so carefully constructed, the Ph.D. she had coveted, the bright academic future she had envisioned, all of it was being publicly ripped to shreds, exposing the ugly fraud beneath. I, she stammered, her voice a pathetic whisper. Dr. Peterson, members of the committee, I was working with so much material. Perhaps I was careless with my citations. My notations were disorganized. The excuse sounded laughably feeble, even to her own ears. Careless? Disorganized? A professor on the panel snapped, slamming his hand on the table. Ms. Lee, this is academic theft. It is a disgrace to this institution and an insult to the very principles of scholarship. How dare you sit there and make excuses? The harsh rebuke was like a physical blow. Tina finally broke, burying her face in her hands as racking sobs shook her body. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, just give me one more chance. I'll withdraw the papers. I'll issue a public apology. Anything. A second chance. Dr. Peterson shook his head, his voice heavy with finality. Academic integrity is a line, not a suggestion. It cannot be crossed. Therefore, in accordance with the university's code of conduct, the committee has voted on the following actions. 1. Your candidacy for the doctoral degree is hereby revoked. 2. All academic honors and awards received on the basis of these fraudulent publications are rescinded. 3. We are recommending your immediate expulsion from the university. And 4. A formal record of this finding will be submitted to the National Academic Integrity Database. No! Tina shrieked, her head snapping up, her face a mess of tears and mascara. Please don't expel me. Don't report it. Please. I've spent my whole life in school. I can't. My parents will kill me. My life will be over. She stumbled forward and fell to her knees, reaching for the dean's sleeve. A younger professor gently but firmly pulled her back. Dr. Peterson looked away, unable to watch, but his voice was like granite. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat. Escort her out. The official notification will be sent to her this afternoon. Tina was half carried, half dragged from the room like a rag doll. In the hallway, passing graduate students stared and whispered. Their curious glances felt like hot pokers on her skin. She had been the department star, the one everyone looked up to. Now, she was a pariah. She was taken to the registrar's office, where she numbly signed for the cold, official letter detailing her expulsion. The single sheet of paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When she stumbled out of the administration building, the bright sunlight made her dizzy. Her phone rang. It was Chloe. She declined it without looking. A text from Vanessa came in. With a choked cry of rage and despair, Tina threw her phone onto the pavement. The screen shattered, a perfect metaphor for her life. The prodigy, the scholar, the promising academic, all gone, replaced by a fraud and a failure. Overwhelming shame and a terrifying fear of the future consumed her. She collapsed onto a bench in the middle of the busy campus quad and wept uncontrollably, no longer caring who saw her. She finally understood that the accolades she had stolen would inevitably become the noose that hanged her. And she had a sickening feeling that the man they had all laughed at on his wedding day had been the one to calmly and expertly kick the chair out from under her. Chapter 7. The home Ethan and Sophia were supposed to share, a sprawling luxury apartment once filled with wedding gifts and happy plans, was now just a cold, empty space. A fine layer of dust coated the expensive furniture, and the air was stale with neglect. Outside the massive windows, the city lights began to twinkle, but their brilliance only seemed to highlight the darkness inside. Sophia sat alone on the vast sofa in the living room, still in her pajamas, her hair unkempt. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and unrelenting anxiety. The giant TV screen in front of her was black, a silent, gaping void. In just a few short months, her entire world had been turned upside down. Chloe was disfigured, and Mars Company was gone. He'd been arrested, facing serious prison time. Vanessa had lost her job and was drowning in debt, with the state medical board investigating her. Tina's fate was even worse, expelled from her Ph.D. program, her academic fraud a public record, her future in ruins. And as for Sophia, the wedding had become a legendary piece of city gossip. Ethan had vanished from her life that day. He never came home, never answered a call, never replied to a text. When she went to his parents, they were polite but distant, murmuring about how these things are for you young people to sort out. She tried to go to his office, but she couldn't get past the front desk, always met with a frosty, "Mr. Vance is out," or "Mr. Vance is in a meeting." Then a few days ago, the final blow had landed. She was served with a summons. Ethan was suing her for divorce. The sharp chime of the doorbell ripped through the silence, making Sophia jump as if she'd been electrocuted. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Two men stood outside. One was a stranger in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. The other was Ethan's assistant, David Chun, his face a perfect, unreadable mask. Her stomach plummeted. With a trembling hand, she opened the door. "Ms. Hayes, good evening." The man in the suit nodded curtly, handing her a thick manila envelope. "My name is Adler. I'm Mr. Vance's legal counsel. I'm here to officially serve you with a copy of the divorce petition and related documents. As per the petition, Mr. Vance is requesting the dissolution of your marriage and the division of assets, pursuant to the prenuptial agreement you both signed." Division. Sophia's voice was a dry rasp. She tore the envelope open, her eyes frantically scanning the cold, legal jargon. When she reached the section on asset distribution, her breath caught in her throat. The blood in her veins turned to ice. The petition was brutally clear, requesting that the court award all premarital property, along with all passive appreciation and interest accrued during the marriage, solely to the plaintiff, Ethan Vance, requesting that of the marital property generated through the plaintiff's active investment of premarital funds, the defendant, Sophia Hayes, be awarded a zero or minimal share due to her significant fault in the dissolution of the marriage. See attached evidence. And requesting that the defendant be held responsible for all court costs. The attached list was dizzying: stock portfolios, real estate holdings, venture capital investments, each followed by an astronomical figure. The significant fault section meticulously detailed the events of the wedding day, citing her complicity in the bridesmaids' hazing as the direct cause of the marriage's collapse. It even mentioned that audio and video evidence would be provided. Zero or minimal share? Sophia's head snapped up, her face ghost white. She stared at the lawyer, her voice rising to a shrill cry of disbelief and terror. "What does he mean? He wants to leave me with nothing. On what grounds?" "The prenup. We agreed to keep our finances separate." Mr. Adler adjusted his glasses, his tone dispassionate, every word a poisoned dart. "Ms. Hayes, the prenup solidifies the ownership of premarital assets. However, we will argue that your consistent and significant enjoyment of the lifestyle funded by Mr. Vance's postmarital income, coupled with your repeated use of his personal funds for large expenditures, we have the credit card statements, constitutes a material breach of the Financial Independence Clause. Furthermore, your actions on the wedding day represent a clear and demonstrable fault in the breakdown of the marriage. Under state law, the court has the discretion to consider such fault when dividing marital assets. Mr. Vance is well within his rights to request that you be awarded nothing." "Fault? What fault?" Sophia shrieked, waving the papers, tears of rage and fear finally spilling over. "Hazing the groom is normal. It was Chloe and the others who went too far. It was Ethan who was oversensitive. He's the one who hit someone. He's the one at fault. How can he do this to me? Don't I get anything for marrying him? For taking care of him?" "Ms. Hayes, David Chun finally spoke, his voice as flat and cold as a frozen lake. Ethan asked me to give you a message. He said, every one of those disgusting drinks at the wedding, you helped pour. As for taking care of him, we have a full year's worth of receipts and schedules from the housekeeping and personal chef services, demonstrating you are not responsible for the majority of domestic labor. Regarding the assault, Ms. Morgan's injuries were legally classified as minor. The police report notes significant provocation, and the matter was settled via mediation. It does not constitute a legal fault that would impact this case. You people. Sophia trembled with fury, pointing a shaking finger at them, rendered speechless by the cold, calculated cruelty of it all. The prenup she had once flaunted as a symbol of her independence was now the rope around her neck. Her careless words on her wedding day had become the weapon he was using to destroy her. All relevant documents are in the folder. I advise you to read them carefully and file your response with the court, Mr. Adler said, his work done. He gave a slight, formal bow. Good evening. David nodded once. Then they both turned and left. The heavy door clicked shut, plunging her back into silence. Sophia's legs gave out. She slid down the cold, hard door, collapsing onto the floor. The thick legal documents scattered around her feet, the black and white pages mocking her. She looked around the opulent, sterile apartment, at the glittering city that no longer felt like it belonged to her, and a wave of absolute despair washed over her. She finally understood. Ethan's revenge wasn't a shouting match or a fistfight. It was this, a quiet, legal, and utterly precise demolition of her life, designed to strip her of everything she had taken for granted. Walk away with nothing. The words echoed in her mind, a terrifying mantra. She pulled her knees to her chest, and, in the vast, empty tomb of her marriage, she began to sob. Chapter 8. The family court chamber was a place of solemn, wood-paneled silence. High on the wall, the state seal gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The gallery was empty. This was a closed hearing. At the plaintiff's table, Ethan sat perfectly still in a dark, impeccably tailored suit. The months of conflict had stripped away the last of his raw anger, leaving behind a cold, metallic resolve. His face was a blank mask, his eyes fixed on the judge's bench. He looked like a man closing a business deal, not ending a marriage. At the defendant's table, Sophia looked small and lost. The lawyer she had hired sat beside her, his expression grim. Sophia wore a conservative beige dress, a desperate attempt at dignity, but the deep shadows under her eyes and the defeated slump of her shoulders told the real story. She couldn't bring herself to look at Ethan. The proceedings were a masterclass in legal evisceration, executed exactly as Mr. Adler had planned. Ethan's evidence was an iron fortress, the signed prenuptial agreement, detailed financial records proving the premarital origin of his core assets, company shares, real estate, and investment capital. A forensic accountant's report that surgically separated the post-marital appreciation of those assets into two categories: passive growth, his alone, and active gains from his investment activities, the only portion legally considered marital property. And the fault evidence. Key clips from the wedding video, clearly showing Chloe's taunts and Sophia's smiling encouragement, including her infamous "it'll show you're serious" line. This was supplemented by sworn affidavits from several wedding guests. Sophia's lawyer fought back, but it was like throwing pebbles at a tank. He argued that the wedding hazing was just a cultural custom, that Ethan's violent reaction was the greater fault, and that Sophia's use of his credit cards was a normal part of marriage. He tried to claim that all of Ethan's income during the marriage should be split equally. But against the mountain of documentation, his arguments crumbled. The prenup was a brick wall, and Adler relentlessly hammered on Sophia's significant fault. The judge's questions grew sharper. Ms. Hayes, the video shows you did not intervene when your bridesmaids made these demands. Why did you instead encourage the plaintiff to drink the concoction? Ms. Hayes, did your use of the plaintiff's personal accounts for hundreds of thousands of dollars in non-essential spending align with the financial independence clause of the agreement you insisted upon? Sophia's answers were rambling and incoherent. She was drowning. Finally, after a long morning, it was over. The judge asked about the possibility of a settlement. Ethan's response was a single, cold word: no. Sophia looked at his unyielding profile, and the last flicker of hope died in her eyes. She shook her head. The gavel fell. Finding that the marriage is irretrievably broken, the court grants the plaintiff's petition for dissolution. Regarding the division of property, pursuant to state law and the evidence presented, the court rules as follows. 1. All property owned by the plaintiff, Ethan Vance, prior to the marriage, along with any passive appreciation of said property, shall remain his sole and separate property. 2. The marital estate, consisting of the appreciation of assets resulting from the plaintiff's active management during the marriage, is valued at X million dollars. However, given the defendant's significant fault in the breakdown of the marital relationship, the court finds it equitable to award 100% of the marital estate to the plaintiff, Ethan Vance. The defendant, Sophia Hayes, is awarded a distribution of 0. 3. All court costs are to be borne by the defendant. The judge's voice was dispassionate, but each word was a death blow. A distribution of 0. Net worth sweep. He had actually done it. She was left with nothing. The room tilted. Sophia swayed, nearly falling from her chair. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, murmuring something she couldn't hear. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan. He was standing now, calmly buttoning his suit jacket. He didn't even glance in her direction. He and Adler turned and walked out of the courtroom, his stride steady and sure. That final, indifferent exit was the last straw. She had lost. Utterly, completely, and publicly. She had walked into this marriage with stars in her eyes and was walking out with nothing but the clothes on her back. A wave of humiliation and regret, so profound it stole her breath, washed over her. Sophia collapsed in her chair and, in the solemn silence of the courtroom, began to weep. Chapter 9. The late autumn sun cast a warm, golden light on the steps of the county clerk's office. The air was crisp, smelling of dry leaves and city exhaust. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. Ethan arrived first. He wore a simple cashmere sweater under a dark wool overcoat, looking relaxed and resolute. He held a simple brown envelope containing the final divorce decree. There was no victory on his face, just a profound, bone-deep calm. The storm was over. A taxi pulled up to the curb, and Sophia got out. She wore a beige trench coat, her face carefully made up to hide the exhaustion, but her eyes were hollow. She clutched a matching envelope, her knuckles white. She saw Ethan waiting on the steps, and for a moment, she froze. A storm of emotions, hatred, regret, shame, flickered across her face before settling into a mask of weary resignation. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked up the steps. They met at the entrance and walked inside, without a word, like strangers in line at the DMV. The clerk behind the counter was all business, processing their paperwork with practiced efficiency. The printer whirred, spitting out 2 official-looking documents. All set, the clerk said, handing one to each of them. Your marriage is officially dissolved. Good luck to you both. The document felt strangely heavy in Ethan's hand. He glanced at the stark, official text, then slipped it into his coat pocket without a second thought. Sophia, however, stared at hers as if it were a venomous snake. Her eyes welled up, and she bit her lip so hard it turned white, fighting back the tears. The marriage she had dreamed of had been reduced to this cold, humiliating piece of paper. They walked back out into the bright, indifferent sunlight. On the top step, Sophia stopped and spun around, the last of her composure finally cracking. Ethan. Her voice was sharp with months of pent-up anguish. You're a monster. Are you happy now? Was it worth it? Ruining my friends' lives, leaving me with nothing. All because of a stupid wedding game. Does this make you feel like a big man? Ethan turned slowly, the sun at his back. His expression was placid, his eyes as calm and deep as a winter lake. He looked at her tear-streaked, contorted face and felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Nothing. A monster, he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the still air. What I did was business. What you and your friends did. Trying to humiliate a man on his wedding day for your own amusement. That was personal. You made your choice the moment you told me not to be a buzzkill. He gave a small, humorless smile. As for having nothing, Sophia, you were the one who insisted on the prenup to prove you weren't after my money. You got exactly what you asked for. Sophia choked on a sob, speechless. His words were a perfect, clinical dissection of her own folly. Ethan didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked down the steps, leaving her and her bitterness behind. He crossed the street to a small, sun-drenched cafe he'd noticed earlier. Inside, the warm smell of roasted coffee enveloped him. He took a seat by the window, the sunlight warming his face. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It arrived moments later, steaming in a simple white mug. He blew on it gently and took a sip. The taste was intensely bitter, a raw, unapologetic bitterness that filled his mouth. It was the taste of the last few months. But as he swallowed, a strange thing happened. A subtle, warm, and complex sweetness began to bloom in the back of his throat, a rich aftertaste that lingered long after the bitterness had faded. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Through the window, he watched the city go about its day, a simple, beautiful, ordinary scene. He reached into his coat, pulled out the divorce decree, and placed it on the table next to his coffee. He picked up his cup again, raised it slightly, as if in a silent toast. A genuine, unforced smile touched his lips as he looked out at the bright day, at the start of his new life. After the bitter, he murmured to himself, taking another slow, deliberate sip, letting the sweet aftertaste wash over him, the sweet,